right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Why don't you come up sometime, see me?
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Hi, Wendy here. Before we start off our episode today, I want to remind everybody to check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Also, please leave a rating or comment on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on social media by simply searching Silver Screen Time Machine, and please make sure you follow our podcast, Silver Screen Time Machine, anywhere you get your podcast. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome again to Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy's Classic Film Review. Today we have a brand new guest, first-time guest, Ross. Hello, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Ross, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So we met through my employment at the Lindsay Theater and Cultural Center in Swickley. I've been there about 2 years, and I'm the Director of Education and Special Programs there. And we've been delighted to host you and the Pittsburgh Classic Movie Club as part of our special programs. And I, again, appreciate the invite, and I'm excited to speak with you this afternoon.
The Lindsay Theater is always so wonderful. They always work so nicely with us in showing classic films. And since this whole podcast is about classic film, we really do appreciate the willingness of the Lindsay Theater and yourself to host that sort of thing. We do have a film coming up in June 11th, Pillow Talk. So anybody that's in the area and wants to check that out, you can go to the Lindsay Theater website at some point. But you can certainly get it on the Pittsburgh Classic Movie Club website, and I imagine the ticket link will be coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, it should be in the next week. Yep.
Yeah, so
Usually
just take a look out for that.
Yep.
Anyhow, as much as we'd like to sit and talk about the Lindsay Theater and the Pittsburgh Classic Movie Club, we are here for a specific reason. So we are going to get in our time machine, and we are going back to 1949, and we are going to talk about
White Heat.
Oh, White Heat. So Ross, I really appreciate you picking this movie, because I actually was surprised to find out I had not seen this.
Okay.
I thought I had seen a lot of James Cagney films.
Yeah. So we were trying to figure out a good time to meet, and I looked and listened to some of the podcasts you've hosted here in the Time Machine. So I saw The Public Enemy on there, and that, of course, caught my eyes and ears.
Yeah, it's so great to have a new podcast guest. We've had a lot of repeat ones recently. Not that I don't also love our repeat guests, but it's nice to have somebody fresh and new. And I'm excited to talk about White Heat because, like you said, if you want to check out, we did do The Public Enemy as one of our podcasts, which is another James Cagney film. And a lot of similarities, I think. But I'm going to go through real quick some stuff about the crew. First of all, White Heat was nominated for one Oscar, Best Writing Motion Picture Story, not the screenwriters. I read somewhere, and I'm not sure what the reasoning, I meant to look it up, that the screenwriters were not eligible for some reason. I don't know if it was just the best writing, but since they didn't write the original story, I'm not really sure. But anyhow, speaking of Best Motion Picture Story, this was based on a story by Virginia Kellogg. Virginia Kellogg was nominated for 2 Oscars, this film and the film Caged. She wrote film stories that would be adapted into screenplays. That was her job. She wrote, I guess you could say, scenarios. Her first job was a reporter with the Los Angeles Times. She would go on to Paramount and start as a script girl and a secretary to director Clarence Brown, who we actually had him recently in our podcast about Flesh and the Devil. He was the director on that. She would move up to writing scenarios for films, and when she was researching for Caged, she would arrange to be sent to prison on false charges, and she would spend time in 4 different prisons to do the research. She sold the rights to her story for White Heat for $2,000. So I guess she has like a prison theme, technically. Because there is a prison segment here as well. I don't know if she wrote that in, because I know there was quite a lot changed. I want to go on to the screenwriters. Screenplay by Ivan Goff and Ben Roberts. Ivan was born in Australia and would eventually make his way to America, and he would start working as a staff writer at different movie studios. He would meet up with Ben Roberts at Republic, but he did not partner up with him until several years later when they met up again in New York and decided to collaborate on a play together. This started their 39-year partnership. Unfortunately, Ivan would die of Alzheimer's. I mention that because there's an interesting theme in this particular film. That's a clue. And then as far as Ben Roberts started out running his own public relations firm at age 22 and writing some comedy material for Broadway plays on the side. He would then move to Hollywood after collaborating with Ivan on that play. It was called The Portrait in Black. Ivan and Ben were nominated for an Oscar for A Man of a Thousand Faces. They were also known for creating the concept and the pilot for the show Charlie's Angels, which I thought was interesting. Goff and Roberts changed the story quite a bit. It was originally based on the true story of a woman bank robber named Ma Barker, who also raised her sons as criminals. That was a true story. Goff and Roberts specifically wanted Cagney in the role of one of the sons, and then when he was cast, of course, the story had to change to revolve around James Cagney. Nobody was more important in the film than James Cagney.
Right.
Supposedly, also, they say that James Cagney made adjustments to his character in the script. He had some rewrites done as well, and he would even have his friends, Humphrey Bogart and Frank McHugh, assist on rewriting, although this was sort of behind-the-scenes rewriting. They were certainly not credited. And they said that McHugh supposedly wrote the opening scene.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. Okay, on to anything you want to say about the screenplay.
No, I think you did a pretty good job there. Covering the ins and outs.
Yep, cover it all.
Yeah.
Our director, Raoul Walsh. He grew up in New York, and when he was younger, he was a friend of the Barrymore family. He would go to work with D.W. Griffith as an actor, actually. He played John Wilkes Booth in the film The Birth of a Nation. Not our favorite film, but he was in it. Griffith wanted to make him a director, and he sent Walsh to film a documentary about Pancho Villa. Villa actually had him even film a firing squad execution, which when, of course, he brought the footage back, they were like, yeah, we're not going to show that in the movie theaters. But his career as an actor was cut short. This is a very odd thing. When a jackrabbit jumped into his car while he was on location in Arizona, causing him to lose his right eye.
I did not know that.
I mean, of all the freak things. Walsh is credited as discovering John Wayne, and he gave him his first leading role in 1930's The Big Trail. He also bred thoroughbred racehorses. He is known for They Died With Their Boots On, High Sierra, and The Thief of Baghdad. His favorite film was The Strawberry Blonde, which also starred James Cagney, and he lived to be 93 years old.
I guess I would just add that some of the contemporary filmmakers that Scorsese in particular, he was a director's director, so there were things and there's different elements in some of their films that are nods to things that he had innovated and his approach to storytelling.
Well, he said he owed a lot of his directing innovations and what he learned as a director to D.W. Griffith, and I mean, it's kind of a good person to learn from, I suppose, as far as techniques and so forth, as far as directing. Our cinematographer, Sidney Hickox, started out as an assistant cameraman in New York's Biograph Studios, which was also a D.W. Griffith studio. He would do wartime photography with the Navy in World War I. He would then go to Hollywood and work as a cinematographer for Warner Brothers most of his career. A lot of these crew people we're going to find are sort of Warner Brothers contract people. And he would often work with director Raoul Walsh. It says he was best known as an action photographer who excelled in shooting the gritty, moody crime films and melodramas. He also had the uncanny ability to make productions shot on a modest budget look a lot classier. He's known for a lot of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall movies, To Have and to Have Not, The Big Sleep, and Dark Passage. The Big Sleep, one of the most confusing films ever made. But yeah, all those have that sort of gritty film noir quality to them.
Yes.
Editor is Owen Marks. He is a two-time Oscar nominee for Casablanca and Janie. He was the Casablanca editor. He was born in England and he was a prize fighter before turning to editing films. He was a contract editor for Warner Brothers and was with them until his death. Actually, he died not while editing, but he was still editing for them when he died. He's known for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, East of Eden, and Angels with Dirty Faces, and obviously Casablanca. The score. Okay, the score. Here's our kind of standout crew person, I think. We have Max Steiner doing the score. Max Steiner is a very famous score writer, nominated for a whopping 24 Academy Awards. He won 3 times for The Informer, Now Voyager, and Since You Went Away. He was from Austria. He was a child prodigy. He created his first operetta at age 12, and he was a professional full-time composer by age 15. What were you doing at age 15?
You're not composing, no.
His godfather was composer Richard Strauss. which I thought was interesting. He would flee to Hollywood during World War I and become one of the first score composers. They didn't really have scores at first in silent films. They just had music to accompany the film, and he was the one that first really started doing scores. And he is often called the father of film music. He is known for Casablanca, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Arsenic and Old Lace, and, of course, Gone with the Wind. I like Max Steiner, and I think some of his scores are excellent. The Now Voyager score is amazing. But I feel like in this sort of film noir, this gangster film, he's a little symphonic and heavy-handed with the music from time to time. I would have liked to hear a more... I mean, he does have a sinister and a suspenseful sound to a lot of his score, but it just seems a little over the top to me for a film like this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I wrote strident score was the first thing that jumps out to me with the film. So there's not a lot of subtlety.
No, it's very boom.
Yeah, it works really well at the beginning. That sets the tone. We're off to the races.
Yep.
It kind of hits you over the head.
It's a little much.
In a good way,
yeah.
I think, right? If you're going to start fast, I think you commit to it. So not a lot of suspense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're cross-cutting between, we get the sense of the landscape, we see the train, cross-cutting to the car, we're introduced to Cagney's character straight away, Cody Jarrett, pretty quickly. And we see the landscape. There's this kind of rapid movement, greater sense of movement with the intercutting, as I mentioned, and it kind of stays on that note throughout, right?
Yeah,
It's not an opportunity for reflection or, as I said, any kind of subtle takes or contemplative or anything, but it's also not necessarily that kind of film, I think, and maybe we'll get to some of the other moments that are a little more...
Yeah, it's just very dramatic. The music is very dramatic. It's sort of the thing that, to me, works really well in an epic film, like Gone with the Wind. To me, in this film, it seems heavy-handed to me. I think Max Steiner is great. I don't want this to take that there's anything wrong with Max Steiner. He's excellent. There's just some points in the film where I thought the music was a little bit too dramatic and could have been slightly toned down. Before we get into the actual plot, a couple trivia points I wanted to mention. The character of Cody Jarrett was based on New York murderer Francis Crawley, who engaged in a battle with police in the spring of 1931 at the age of 18. He was executed in the electric chair for his crimes, including the murder of several police officers. He was 19 when he was executed. The train robbery was filmed using the former Southern Pacific Tunnel in Chatsworth, California. Location work was done in the San Fernando Valley, areas of Van Nuys and Chatsworth. That's the railroad tunnel again. The opening scenes were filmed in the Santa Susana Mountains near Chatsworth, California. The finale was shot in an oil refinery in Torrance, California, and it is still a refinery today and continues to serve as a somewhat ominous yet futuristic background for films, TV shows, and music videos. According to Warner Brothers records, the film earned $2,189,000 domestically and $1,294 foreign. It wasn't a box office smash, but I don't think they lost money on it. They did all right.
Yes.
All right. Let's get on to the plot. You already started talking about a little bit. So you were talking about the train. The very first thing you see is the train coming through the tunnel. That's even before the credits start. I'm glad you mentioned the cross-cutting and so forth, because I thought the editing in this film was done very well and very seamlessly. And I have a lot of notes about the editing. And I thought the camera work was done really well as well, because you have a lot of overhead shots in this film, a really nice pan from overhead in this. You see the train, and then you have a nice pan of the area, a big overhead pan. I don't know if they had a crane or if they were on a helicopter. I'm not really sure how they got so high, but it doesn't look choppy like a helicopter. I'm assuming they had a crane. And then I wrote very strong music here.
Yeah.
It was really comes at you right away, like bam. I guess in a way, preparing you that this is going to be something big. Watch. I thought a really interesting thing that they did too was they're going through the credits and then they show the train again, and then there's a sort of really quick pan right. Did you see that? And it takes you to a close-up of Cagney in the car.
Right.
So I said the camera movement is really nice throughout, I thought. That's basically the first thing you see after the credits is Cagney sitting there. It's just this big shot of him.
Yeah, I would add that particularly in this opening scene when we're introduced to him, he's central while there's this other rapid movement around him.
Yep.
Through the train, through the car, and so forth. He's stable.
Yep.
He's center frame.
Good point.
With some low angle. And even some of his actions that follow there, fully in control.
Yeah.
Right? It's just something that stuck out with all of the, again, kind of rapid movement and things. That does not bring a sense of chaos or lack of control to his character.
To his character,
Yeah.
yes.
He's in charge. He's calling the shots.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point. So before we get into the rest, we talk about James Cagney real quick. James Cagney plays Cody, nominated for 3 Academy Awards. He did win the Oscar for Best Actor in Yankee Doodle Dandy. Born in New York City, his family was impoverished and had 7 children, 2 who died just months after being born. James was very sickly as well, and they feared he might not live. Luckily, he did. He said his father was an alcoholic and subject to violent rages, and that was something he actually mimicked in this film, the violent rages of his father. His father wound up dying in the 1918 flu pandemic, and James would hold various jobs to help bring money into the family. He was a very industrious person. He was very hardworking. He learned tap dancing as a child, and he was an excellent tap dancer. He was also a semi-professional baseball player and an amateur boxer. They said he could have been a professional boxer, but his mother didn't want him to be a boxer. His dancing skills got him a job on the stage in the chorus, and he would continue on stage work for a decade in vaudeville and on Broadway, and he would eventually star in a play called Penny Arcade on Broadway with Joan Blondell. It was adapted to film, and they were both brought on for the film, renamed Sinner's Holiday, and he was then signed to a contract. He would go on to have his breakout role in the film we discussed, Public Enemy. Orson Welles once said James Cagney was maybe the greatest actor who ever appeared in front of the camera. And he's also known for Mr. Rogers and Angels with Dirty Faces, among many, many other films. What are your thoughts on James Cagney? I'm tempted to agree with Orson Welles. James Cagney is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah, obviously like him, having decided to speak about this film today. Yeah, there's some things that I find myself going back to, kind of first pass. You get the tough guy, come back to it, and just the iconic lines and the delivery, and then people sort of mimic it, and then there's copies of copies. And,
yeah. There's a lot of versatility, though, for him. He's kind of typecast in this gangster role, but then yet he goes and does Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Exactly.
And phenomenal in that.
Right. And I think brings an awareness and understanding of his movements in different ways and some subtlety, and doesn't just rely on that persona or the typecast, if you will.
He's a full body actor, and I think a lot of that maybe comes from his athletic background, his dancing, his boxing. He's surprisingly graceful, even when he's being a thug. He's very graceful, and like I said, full body acting, and his expressions. I mean, his expressions are just phenomenal. He's got a very expressive face.
Right. And just experience performing vaudeville, right?
Yeah.
Early on at the same time. So just, playing to the last row and understanding how to dial that in for a close-up, dial that in for the camera.
Yeah, he's not talked about a lot whenever people talk about the greatest actor ever. His name isn't mentioned a lot, but I think he should be in that conversation. All right, so we talked about James Cagney, back to where we were at. So the guys are all there. The train has come in. Their plan is to basically rob this train. 2 of the guys are on the train. They knock out the one guy, the conductor, because he's not playing ball or whatever they said. And then you see, this is again where you're talking about you're cutting. It's going to cut from scene to scene to scene, like these little small scenes. They're not a whole scene, but these little flashes of what everybody's doing. It keeps cutting back and forth. So you cut from the guys in the train, then you cut to Zuki and Cody. They're leaving the car. And this is when James Cagney goes up onto the top of the tunnel and he jumps onto the train, which I'm guessing that might not have actually been James Cagney that performed that particular feat. Let's hope not.
Right.
It looked very dangerous.
It's not a close-up.
Yeah,
right?
no.
So
they get the train to stop. This Zuki or whatever, he goes on the train. He's going to drive the train, apparently, this fellow. We don't get a lot of backstory about this Zuki. Apparently, we find out later on that I guess he's a newer member of this gang, and he keeps saying all these things. He keeps giving away all this information to the engineers. He's calling him his name. He's calling Cody, and then he's telling them, "Oh, I used to drive on the such and such place."
Yeah,
and Cody's like,
back on the CNO, we used to do it this way.
And Cody's like, "Shut up."
He says, why don't you give him my
address?
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the thing about James Cagney, too. Even when he's playing the meanest, toughest, most terrifying gangster, there's always a little bit of humor wrapped in there. And there's always a bit of vulnerability.
Right.
And I think this is the thing with James Cagney. His character is absolutely villainous and horrible, and you're supposed to hate this character, and you're supposed to wish that something bad happened to him, and he gets caught. But I always find myself wishing that James Cagney would succeed, even if it means he has to murder everybody in the world. Oh, come on, don't let anything happen to James Cagney.
Right, and there's some turns where pretty easy to find yourself
rooting for him,
rooting for the anti-hero.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's something about him specifically. He does a great job of making you like him and root for him. So they get the train stopped. They're trying to get the treasury money that's in the postal car. So they're shooting that. They have to blow it open. And then why the engineer said this, I don't know. But he says something like, "You're not going to get away with this, Cody," or I don't remember. He says, but he calls James Cagney Cody. Well, why would you do that, first of all? And then, of course, James Cagney's like, "Oh, well, I guess you know my name." So
right.
Shoots him. And then he's like, well, she just shoots the other guy for good measure, too, since he's just standing there, even though he hasn't said anything. But it just, that kind of, I think, gives you the sense of how cold-blooded this character is. It's like nothing to him shooting human beings. He could care less. He's just like, you're in the way.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, the one engineer falls on a lever that shoots steam out, and poor Zuki, however you say his name, is standing there, and his face gets all burned. And here's another case of how cold-blooded Cody is. He gets out, he's like, oh, he got scalded. Come on, guys, we got to go. And he runs off and leaves this guy there, and the other guys are trying to help him.
Right.
All right, and they do a lot of dissolves and so forth, I notice in this, and the transitions. There's a lot of transitions from scene to scene. So you see the guys, they're running off, and then the next thing there's a dissolve, and there's a news report about the train robbery, and you see the guys listening in the car. They do a really nice job of starting out close up, the guy listening to the radio, and then it does a nice pullback and shows the whole scene.
Yeah.
It does that numerous times in the film. Again, I really like the camera movement in this. And you can see the guys are starting to get disgruntled. They're getting a little disgruntled, especially this fellow, Big Ed. Big Ed is the head guy that's causing, trouble. He's the disgruntled one. He actually calls Cody a crackpot. He nominates himself to be in charge.
Right.
This fellow that plays Big Ed, I wanted to talk about him for a minute because he is a very interesting fellow, not necessarily in a good way. So, Big Ed was played by a fellow named Steve Cochran. This fellow grew up in Wyoming. He would perform in plays throughout his school year, but he was more a fan of basketball. He was a big basketball player in high school, and also he played basketball in college. He attended the University of Wyoming. He also worked as a cowboy, an actual cowboy, prior to attending college. He then would quit college and go to Hollywood to become a film actor. He would also do theater work with the Federal Theater Project in Detroit. That's something we talked about in HUD, I believe, the Federal Theater Project done by FDR in the New Deal. But if you want to hear about that, you have to go back and listen to HUD. He was discovered at this federal theater by Sam Goldwyn and signed to a contract. He made several films with Virginia Mayo, a lot of films, including playing her lover in The Best Years of Our Lives. He would get more attention after he starred on Broadway in Mae West's scandalous play, Diamond Lil, and would be signed to a contract with Warner Brothers. Now, Cochran was a notorious womanizer, attracted tabloid attention for his tumultuous private life, which include many well-documented affairs with numerous starlets and actresses. And if you want to know more about it, Mamie Van Doren wrote about their sex life in graphic detail in her tell-all autobiography, Playing the Field, My Story. So if you want to learn more, you can pick that up. Cochran, okay, this is very interesting. At one point, Cochran recruited 3 young women to accompany him on a sailing trip from Acapulco to Costa Rica to take part in an upcoming film. One of these girls was 14, I might add. Not great. A few days into the trip, the yacht lost one of its 2 masts in the storm. Shortly thereafter, Cochran fell ill and died 2 days later on June 15, 1965, at the age of 48, of what was later to be determined an acute lung infection. The women who were accompanying him did not know how to sail the boat and were trapped with a decomposing body for 10 days before being rescued out to sea. The boat, still carrying his corpse, was later found drifted off the coast of Guatemala. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, wow. That's tragic in many ways.
Yes. Anyhow,
yeah,
that's the fellow that plays Big Ed.
Yeah, there's a pretty stark everything. There's not a lot to figure out in this film, in a good way, right? So your eyes know where to go, your ears, you're focused on as the characters are moving through the plot. I mean, of course, I think what's interesting about it is that the audience is clued in, the table set.
Yes.
We know more than the characters know.
Correct.
Throughout the film. And the technique's not brand new at the time, but also not perfected in cinema, right? Sort of using sound and image and other tools, to greatest effect. But his name's Big Ed. Cagney, of course, we know, smaller stature. They're in the room together. And straight away, there's very little back and forth before Cody goes into the line talking to his wife, right?
Yes.
If I turned my back long enough for him to put a hole in it, there'd be a hole in it.
Yep.
Let me tell you something about this guy. This is the type of guy he is. And it's for the audience, right? It's not obviously the wife would.
I also think he's saying it for Big Ed's benefit, as if to say, I know you're on it. I know what you're doing. You're not fooling me. Right. I know what your plan is.
Not a lot of subtlety, which,
it's almost
which is funny because it puts you in the middle.
Yeah, I love when he says it, too, because he's always smiling like, try it, buddy. It's like this challenge. He challenges him.
Right. Big Ed, big ideas.
Yeah,
one of these days he's going to get an idea about me, right? A
lot of the things that Cody says or James Cagney says in this film, he's smiling a lot. And I think it makes it even more terrifying than if he was saying it very angrily. The way he smiles sometimes is very scary.
Yeah, there's a little dissonance there. Like he's a lot of close-ups on him.
There is.
As we've talked about, expressive eyes and face, and he gives it a beat, right? He gives it a beat. He takes stock of it, and even you think, is he going to let this person off? Is it he's gonna cool out, right? How's he going to take it? But it's equally sinister, and I think it's a nice interplay, and it's a nice point of entry for the audience to fill in the blanks a little, and there's maybe where the cat and mouse happens, since we know.
I would agree. Very cat and mouse.
We know the other things.
So another thing that's going on in this whole house situation, what they're doing is hanging out here, trying to hide out for a bit to lay low until this sort of blows over and they can safely get to their next point of destination. But meanwhile, also who's there is his mother and his wife, as you said. His wife is named Verna, the mother, Ma Jared. Now, this is a very common Cagney theme. He always has this very close relationship with his mother in numerous of these gangster films, including Public Enemy. This is just why Cagney is synonymous with this. I'm not sure, maybe just because he started doing it at some point and everybody just really liked it. But this is in a lot of his films. And you can see he's very close with his mother, but then you can also see that the mother and Verna don't seem to be very close. They don't seem to get along. As a matter of fact, she's making food. He asks her how she's doing. She says she could use help, and he goes to the bedroom, tells Verna to get up. And then there's this very scandalous moment, especially in 1949, where she goes to get out of the bed, and you see the flash of her upper thigh. Very scandalous at the time. As a matter of fact, I think that got censored in Britain because of that. Again, they must have a camera on a trolley or something, because every time they move through the house, the camera just follows along with them really nicely. No matter how far they're walking, the camera's following them. There's a lot of close-ups. I mentioned again, there's a lot of close-ups on Cody. I want to, since we mentioned Ma Jarrett, we should talk about the actress.
Sure.
She is... I don't have a lot on her, to be honest, but Margaret Wycherley. She was nominated for 1 Oscar, Sergeant York. She was born in England. Margaret was predominantly a stage actress. That's why I don't have a lot of info on her. She was in a critically acclaimed play called The 13th Chair that wound up being adapted to film, and Bela Lugosi was in the film adaptation, and she reprised her role in that, and that got her noticed by American audiences. She would mostly play character roles in films and often mother roles. She was known for The Yearling and The Keeper of the Flame, which is a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn film that I think is not well-known collaboration of theirs, Keeper of the Flame. I've seen it, but it's a very out there, rare film, I think. Okay. And as far as Verna, Virginia Mayo, she was born in St. Louis. She attended dance classes at her aunt's school when she was a child. She would get a role in a vaudeville act called Morton and Mayo. That's how she got her last name. She was actually called Virginia Jones. That was her birth name. She was discovered again by Sam Goldwyn. He was discovering everybody in this film, and signed to a contract which would eventually lead to a contract with Warner Brothers. They said she was slightly cross-eyed and had to be shot a certain way to minimize that. And then if you hear that and then look, it becomes a lot more apparent. She is known for The Best Years of Our Lives, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and A Song is Born. So the mother and Verna, not big fans of each other. And then there's a little interplay here. Verna's offering Big Ed some coffee, and Cody gets infuriated. I don't want my wife serving anybody, which I assume he means anybody but him. I'm sure he doesn't object to her serving him. And then that's when he says your thing about, Big Ed, if he could shoot me in the back, he would, or whatever the quote was. That's when he says that, and he's kind of mocking him. And this is when he's sitting down, then they're shooting him from a low angle in this particular part, and then he starts this moaning, and he falls over, he's holding his gun, the shot goes off as he's holding his gun, and he falls into the room, and then he kind of gets himself off into the other room, and as the audience, you're kind of like, what the heck is going on? What's happening here? And after that, Big Ed says, oh, he's nuts just like his dad. And supposedly this was Cagney's idea. This was not in the script, that he wanted Cody to be insane, or to have an insane father, and to also be insane and to have these headaches. That was an idea Cagney put in there, probably to add vulnerability to the character.
Right. And yeah, I would agree with that take. And then also, he's a bit older. So there's just maybe some limited range in terms of what would make sense for a backstory. I mean, and feeds into and plays into the relationship with his mother. Right?
Yes, true.
That she's like, why else would she, here's this hardened criminal, beats the system, runs a gang, has this whole crew, he's got it all figured out. So it's his Achilles heel, right?
Yeah.
This psychotic breaks, mental health, or whatever. But it's also something that he can't escape because, of course, you mentioned there's a line about his father, and then he discloses later in the film, next, first my father, then my brother, right? So it's just the two of us, me and Ma, propping each other up. So yeah, that kind of plays into how they're linked.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in this scene, when she's in the other room tending to him, he sits on her lap.
Yes.
And they said that was another thing that was Cagney's idea.
Right, it was improvised.
Sit on her lap like a little boy, like he's still her little baby.
Right. And she's rubbing his neck and touching. And yeah, when they get into the other room, it's interesting that he puts his face down. Yeah. Right? Again, we're sort of drawn into, he pulls you into those scenes where they could be. It starts off quite literally explosive, right? As you mentioned, he falls over and accidentally
shoots the gun.
Has the gun go off there, and then he turns away from the camera, buries his head on the bed and the pillow, and it's clear that this is a dance they do together, right? It's pretty apparent. Yeah. That she's going to soothe him in that moment.
And she also doesn't want him going back out when he's not completely recovered, because she said, don't let them see like this. And this is when she gives him a drink and she says the line, top of the world, son. And that's going to become the theme through this particular film. The mother is tough. She instills this toughness in Cody. In the original thing, she was the criminal and she made her children be criminals. And I guess we get that sense here, too, that she's part of the criminal enterprise, and maybe she's a big part of the criminal enterprise. So he shakes it off. He gets out. Comes back out, starts bossing people just to prove that nothing's wrong with him. He starts especially picking on Verna, because you might as well pick on the woman, right? That always shows how tough you are. And then this one guy comes in and says, a storm is coming. And I do like this part of the music, because there's a sort of swirly music. It almost seems like a storm, or like hurry, giving you the sense to hurry, or that there is a storm, or maybe both. And Cody asks, how'd you hear about this storm? And the guy says, I heard it on the radio. And he starts barking orders. We're going to leave tonight, blah, 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 blah. And then he socks this guy and says, I told you not to listen to the radio. And I just wrote that I think that James Cagney can look very, very terrifying. And then Cody's packing up the money in a suitcase, and here comes Verna. This is, I think, is a good beginning of really learning Verna's character here. She comes in, she asks Cody, why don't you keep all the money? It's your money. You see her kind of using her feminine wiles to influence Cody. That's what I thought. And this is a very femme fatale type character. And it's clear she's interested in money. That's what she wants. She wants to have all this money. She tries to influence him. You get the sense that she's not out there for him, certainly. She's out there for her, I think. That scene shows you a lot about Verna, in my opinion.
Yes, she's pretty one-dimensional. She doesn't really develop she's the path she's on.
She's about her. Right. She doesn't care about Cody. She doesn't care about any of these guys. She cares about Verna. And then poor Zuki, he's actually still with them. We kind of forgot about him for a minute, but he's all bandaged up, and Cody tells him, we'll send back for a doctor for you. And Zuki's like, no, he's not going to. He's going to leave me here. And he's calling for this other fellow, Cotton. He's one of the other gangsters. And then they go outside. There's the wind, the approaching storm. And then the mother suggests, what if they find Zuki? And he says, and then she says, well, you know how he talked. And so then Cody goes and tells Cotton to go shoot him, who's actually his friend. And instead of shooting him, all he does is shoot a bullet in the air and to the top of the roof. And then he takes a pack of cigarettes out and puts it in his pocket and says, "Oh, these are for you. Keep these with you. I'll try to get back." Meanwhile, we've been told by Cody there's no way to tie these guys to this guy Zuki. And then he leaves. That's sort of a clue right there. This fellow that played Cotton is called Wally Castle. He was born in Italy. He was a close friend of Mickey Rooney, who gave him his stage name, and he lived to be 103 years old.
Nice.
There's a very ominous music when they're leaving. Cody, he tells Big Ed to go ahead and separate from them. They'll meet up later. And then you see Verna at the car window looking out at Big Ed and making this sort of expression at him. And then he smiles at her and he looks out the car window, and you know that something's up there. Right. There's an underlying thing going on there. Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting thing I thought about this film. It will go to a dissolve to a sign that says Tahoe County Morgue. Now, I've noticed a lot of the scenes start with signs, and it kind of, to me, seemed reminiscent of silent film era where you had your title cards. I noticed they did that on numerous scenes, and I thought that was really interesting. Raoul Walsh was a silent film director. So I wonder if that was sort of a harken back to...
Sure, and then just with the pacing, right? So, showing, not telling, and moving things along, even if one scene to the next isn't driven by some action that's relevant to the plot. So
it's almost like announcing.
There's an economy to it.
This is what you're at here. You're at here now.
Yeah.
So the cops are talking to this autopsy doctor. They bring in this fellow. His name is Philip Evans. He's the Treasury Department investigator. He was played by John Archer. The interesting thing I found out about John Archer, there wasn't a lot of information about him, but his daughter is the actress Ann Archer. She's a very, very famous actress. But anyhow, Evans, he comes in, he's the investigator. What they found is they found Zuki frozen up in the mountains, and the doctor said he had steam burns on, and he said that the cops thought, oh, well, that seems like possibly from a steam engine. And then Evans says, well, what did you find on his clothes? And they take his clothes to test his clothes. And he says, oh, the only thing we found in his clothes was a pack of cigarettes. And then you're like, uh-oh. And then you have this nice overhead pan of the buildings I really like, and it dissolves to another sign on the door that says Treasury Department, Philip Evans. And Evans is talking to this informer type guy, and they're looking for the money. They're trying to find money on the street from the Treasury thing, and they can't find any. And the guy comes in and says, hey, this dirt on this guy's clothes matched the dirt in the tunnel, so now we can tie this guy to being in the robbery. And they're like, okay, that's good. Well, nice. And then he said, but there's no luck with the fingerprints. It doesn't match anything in the system. And they're like, oh, bummer, it's a dead end. But then he gets this little ticket or whatever that says the prints on the cigarette pack they found belonged to Cotton, a known member of the Jarrett gang. And he's like, okay, so we know it's the Jarrett gang. So that was a really bad point of him putting those cigarettes in that guy's clothes, because he just tied the guy. Otherwise, they would have had a dead end. There's that music again. I think maybe some of the strong score music might sort of be the theme music of the film. I'm not really sure because I didn't pay attention to if it always sounded the same, but I imagine it might be some theme music. There's I really like this one, the same building pan they had before with the buildings and wherever the Treasury Department is. I assume Washington, D.C. I don't know. I never seem to know where they are except for when they go to Springfield, because they say they're in Springfield. But otherwise, I'm not really sure where these people are. Wherever the Treasury Department is that Philip Evans is, they have this nice pan of the city. And then the next thing you see is a pan of a new city. This is a brand new city. And then there's a really nice zoom in on the cars on the street, which I thought was very well done. And then you have a new sign. It says Millbank Motels. And now you know that's where the gang is holed up. So because Cody drives up in his car. But he's freaking out. You get that frantic music again that goes really well. Whenever something's really frantic, he's freaking out. He's knocking on the door. He asks Verna, where's Ma? And she's standing on the chair. I'm not really sure why. I think she's trying to see her whole self in the mirror.
Yeah, she's modeling in the mirror. Vanity.
Yeah. And Verna's like, what does it matter where your mother is? What's the big deal? And he said the T-men tied Zuki to them, and he thinks somebody tipped them off. He doesn't obviously know about the cigarettes, and he's worried about his mother being out. He says they're all hot. And she starts saying stuff. Verna starts talking very sarcastically to Cody, why she would do that, I'm not sure. But they have a close-up of his face. He gets this really angry look, and he kicks her off her chair and knocks her down onto the couch, which I kind of feel like she deserves because she has a bad attitude. And then they show the mother in the market, and somebody gets in the phone booth and calls Evans, says, this lady's here. I'm going to leave a marker on her bumper, which they do. And then they do this really cool, elaborate thing where they plot out all the streets, and they put their guys on certain streets so that whoever's following her, there's a way to intersect if one of them loses her. And they're all talking on these phones in the car. So in 1949, did they have car phones?
No, but I think I don't know why they didn't just use like a police CB. Yeah, but maybe it was something about the quality. I mean, it must have been something available, but yeah, they looked too similar to
they look like
a house phone.
Yeah, they look like
with a cable and not like a spire. So it was a little funny, but I think it was also, there's touches of this technology, as you mentioned, the analysis, the spectrograph, the soil, the fingerprints. And then now this is the next step of sort of advanced police technology that these criminals aren't aware of or can't escape from, that the good guys are well equipped. Yeah. So I think that was how it was playing. But for me, I think it was probably just to sell the tone of voice, right? The quality, so they didn't have to add an effect.
And it makes it makes it kind of nice the way they say it, the way they say it in these sort of level. So-and-so, cars on street, it's sort of like a nice effect. I've had that in other films where you have the sort of repetitive monotone talking, and it makes it very interesting, and in a way kind of does build up suspense, I feel like. And I really think this is a good scene because I'm really impressed with the way they did this filming in the cars, because I'm somebody that despises rear projection, and when I see rear projection I go crazy and I get berserk because I hate it so much. But for some reason, if they were using rear projection, it's not very noticeable because she's driving and she's looking, you can see the car following her behind as they're shooting her. And then what I think is even more impressive is she looks in the rearview mirror and you see the car. And I thought, wow, what great camera work for 1949. Really good.
No, it's pretty seamless. As you mentioned, the rear projection technique typically takes you out of the
it looks
scene
fake.
In some way. You're like, okay, the suspension of disbelief becomes more of a challenge in those moments.
But this was very well done. And they do a great job of shooting to her in the car and the car behind us. And then they'll shoot to the cars driving on the side. They must have had a camera where they could sort of, I don't know how they managed it. Like, again, unless they had the crane and they would shoot the cars driving by. You'd see the car driving by, and then you'd go back to the mother and the angle. And sometimes they even had the guys behind the heads of the guys and the car in front. But it's really, really well done, all the camera work. And it really, all the cutting and the different angles really, again, make the chase very suspenseful and interesting, and the monotone talking and everything. It works really, really well. Really, really well. Very well done. But the whole point of it is she does eventually lose them because a car comes out, this car with a camper comes out and blocks their way, and they lose her.
Right.
And just by a funny coincidence, they happen to turn around in this Millbank motel because they're like, oh, we don't know, let's just turn around here. And then all of a sudden they look over and there's the car with the marker on the bumper, and they're like, oh, well, here it is. Lucky us. What a coincidence. And Evans jumps out of the car. He tells his partner, because now their phone isn't working because they're in a dead zone. You know how that works with those car phones in the 1949. And then he says, go ahead, go up and try to find a zone where you can call. I'm going to stay here and what? And then, again, we're cutting back and forth to different parts of the scene. So you have them doing that, and then you immediately see Verna in the hotel. She's complaining, oh, we're always having to run away, every little thing, blah, 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 blah. She's such a brat. And Cody's like, oh, I believe in my mom's hunches. And he's like, we got to get out of here. And he's like, well, let's go out on the coupe because they know the other car. And he goes to get the coupe. He just jumps into the front seat to start the car. And Evans comes around the corner, says, stick 'em up, get your hands away. And he sort of reaches into the glove compartment, turns out shoots Evans. He falls, and then that gives them the opportunity. They all run in the car and they get away. Don't fear, Evans isn't dead. He's just wounded.
Yeah,
Cody can shoot remarkably well in every other occasion, except in this particular occasion, when he's very close to him, he doesn't manage to hit him.
Yeah.
Except in the shoulder or whatever. And the partner comes back, wherever he was, he came back almost instantaneously with his car, and Evan says, they're going down the highway, chase them, and then you get another...
the Ernie character.
Yeah, you get another cool chase scene, car chase scene. If you're somebody that likes car chase scenes, this is a good film for you. There's a lot of car chase scenes. And you have your frantic music when they're driving, the sirens wailing, very tense, very tense. But then I really like, because they pull off to this, they just quickly go around the corner to this drive-in theater. And I really love this Art Deco style of the theater. It's really cool. Yeah. They say that's still there. It's not a drive-in anymore, but they say that building is still there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in California. So that he has managed to, they go in and they go to the drive-thru and they're watching a movie and they've given the cops the slip. And Cody announces this plan. First of all, Verna says, are we going to watch a second feature? You know, she's such a brat. And Cody tells him about this plan he has, that he's going to give himself up and he's going to claim responsibility. He's going to confess to this different job, this hotel payroll job that was done in Springfield, Illinois. And he's going to claim he did it, and they're going to give him a couple years in jail. And apparently this robbery happened simultaneous to the train robbery. So if he's booked for that, then he can't be the person that did the train robbery. He thinks this is a very clever plan. And of course, so does Ma. She thinks everything Cody does is good. Do you have anything you want to... I feel like I'm going...
No, that's fine.
At this point, we could continue on. I just wanted to see if you were something you wanted to mention as we're going along.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of an unconventional getaway, which is nice. And just, again, we're in this space where the three of them are bench seat of the car together, right? Yes. There's this forced intimacy of these three.
But you notice the mother is always next to Cody, not the wife.
Exactly. So
I think that's very ironic. There's one scene where they're all getting in the car and Verna goes to go in the front seat and he pushes her into the back seat so the mother can sit in the front seat. I don't remember exactly where it is, but I remember as it happened, I was like, oh.
Right.
So it just goes to show the level of importance in the women of his life. It's quite clear who's number one. Not that Verna deserves to be number one, but... And she even says, oh, I don't know how I can go for 2 years without you. And he says, I'll be back. She, I'll wait for you. You can trust me. And we're all like, yeah, right. We don't believe you. Nobody believes that, except Cody, apparently.
Right.
He seems like he believes it. And he gives them some instructions on what they should do when they get interviewed by Evans. And then when he leaves, you see this little smile on Verna's face, this little devious smile. And you know she's going to be up to no good. And you get the impression that she's probably going to hook up with Big Ed.
Right.
And then you get into the scene where Ma and Verna are talking to Evans. He's interviewing them, and Ma's a tough cookie. She doesn't put up with anything. And
yeah, she's pretty good. Does this sort of coy, I don't know the law, but seems to me.
She's always doing this thing where she's making suggestions, not giving orders, like with Cody and with this guy. Not with the other men, but it's like she's just insinuating what she wants them to do. You know what I mean? She's very, coy. She's very sneaky like that. Manipulative, I would say. Yeah, that's the word I would give for her. And this is an interesting thing. It's almost like a battle between Ma and Evans. They have this close-up confrontation. You close up to her, close up to him, close up to her. And you feel like they're waging a little war between the two of them, which is very interesting, I think. But anyhow, what winds up happening is that they said, he was in Springfield. And he says, well, that's funny. How did he shoot me from 2 states away? And they're like, what do you mean? Did anybody see him shoot you? And he's like, well, you were there. Right. And Ma's like, Verna, did you see Cody? And Verna's like, she does not allowed to talk. She's just crying and shaking her head. And she's like, well, there's no witnesses. So I guess that won't stand up that won't stand up in court.
Oh, it's just you.
And she's like, I don't think you can hold us here either. And he's like, just okay, and lets them leave. Mm-hmm. And then instead of a sign, this time you get a newspaper article saying, Cody Jarrett surrenders, this big picture of James Cagney looking very menacing. He's sort of looking down. And, okay, this is when we're going to meet Hank, because Evans is in his office. There's a shot of Evans in his office, and in comes Hank Fallon. He has a sort of fishing reel. He's talking about how he can't wait to go fishing. And he's like, I've been in the prison for so long. It's going to be so great to go out and go on a vacation. I was promised a vacation. And Evans is like, well, actually, we kind of need you to do this job now. And poor Fallon is like, But when he tells him what's going on, he kind of springs it on him in a way that starts to make Fallon interested in it, because he tells him like, look, he claimed he did this. And Fallon's like, well, everybody knows he didn't do that. And he's like, oh, but he checked out. Well, what's going on here? They're just going to give him a pass on the gas chamber, and he's getting kind of irritated about it. And he's finally like, well, we're working with the Springfield Police, but what we really need is somebody to go inside and be his cellmate and get information. And then at this point, he's sort of trapped into being like, well, okay.
Right. I mean, it's a pretty maybe ham-fisted metaphor there where he's sort of reeling in,
yeah.
And he, reels him in.
He has to go
to
fishing,
the job, right?
and he's got to go fishing for something else now.
Right.
But we should speak of the guy that plays Fallon is Edmund O'Brien. And actually, he plays Fallon and Vic. It's the same. It's just Vic is his undercover name. He was nominated for 2 Oscars. He did win a Best Supporting Oscar for The Barefoot Contessa. He was born in New York. His parents were both Irish immigrants. As a child, he learned magic and conjuring tricks from his neighbor, Harry Houdini. He was interested in the theater as a child, and he would perform in plays in school before going into summer stock and then on to Broadway. He was noticed by Pandro Berman, who offered him a role in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which started his film career. In 1949, 3,147 members of the Young Women's League of America voted that O'Brien had more male magnetism than any other man in America today. And they said, quote, Edmund O'Brien's magnetic appearance and personality most fully stir women's imaginative impulses. We're all agreed that he has more male magnetism than any of the 60 million men in the United States today. End quote.
Okay.
So, woo. That's quite the compliment for Edmund O'Brien. But unfortunately, as he aged, he had trouble keeping off the weight, which would change his appearance and made it hard for him to get his leading man roles. He would also start having health problems. He was supposed to be cast as Jackson Bentley in Lawrence of Arabia, but he suffered a heart attack, and the part was given to Arthur Kennedy, who I never really noticed until then looks a little bit like Edmund O'Brien. There is a similarity about the way they look to me. But then, sadly, he would also begin having memory problems and would be diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which would eventually cause his death. A fun fact, he is the only person to win an Oscar playing the character named Oscar. And he was also known for DOA, The Killers, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and 7 Days in May. I thought he did a really good job in this film.
Yeah.
He's a nice foil to James Cagney, I feel like.
Right.
Evans, first of all, he wants him to do 2 things. He wants Hank to do 2 things. He wants Hank to find out if he did the train robbery, get him to admit to doing the train robbery. And then he also wants to find out who this fence is that's laundering the money for them. And they start going over all these sheets of people who might recognize Fallon. They want to see who the prisoners are in case there's somebody that could recognize him and rat him out. And then they also talk about going over his cover story, and this time they're going to create him a fake wife. And he says, oh, he's partial to blondes. And Evan says, well, I'll send you a picture, which winds up getting him in a little trouble, but we'll get to that. And Fallon's going through these pictures. He picks up this picture of Beau, and then you get a close-up of the photo of the guy. And he says, oh, this guy will recognize me for sure. You make sure to get him out of that prison. And Evan says, oh, it's no big deal. He's going to be released before you even get in, so we don't have to worry about him. And it's like they made such a big deal about zooming in on the photo. You know there's going to be more coming up on that. You know that can't be the end of it.
Right. And he has some scarring on his face, so it's pretty distinctive.
Evans talks about, this is when he sort of gives a backstory about Cody. He says his father was insane. He died in an institution. He talks about those headaches he has. He says the only person he ever cared about was his mother, and he thinks Cody might crack up without her. That's his fear. And I think Fallon says something like, oh, well, I better brush up on my lullabies.
Right.
And then you see the court hearing where Cody's being sentenced. There's a nice kind of close-up of the judge and then a pull back. That they do that thing. There's a lot throughout the film where they start out with a close-up of somebody and do a real nice pull back until you see the whole entire scene. And it's showing the back of Cody's head facing the judge. And as Cody's walking out, he bumps into Victor, and Victor's like, oh, is he tough? And Cody's just like, doesn't want to talk to this guy. And the next thing you see is this nice, beautiful overshot of the prison yard, and Victor comes over to Cody, and Cody has a cellmate that he calls Reader. This guy can read lips, so he's using him. He's trying to find out what these other people are saying by letting this guy read their lips. And the Reader's telling him that these guys are talking about Big Ed being in charge now, and that he's got things going on more ways than one. And Cody takes that to mean a reference to Verna. He gets real angry. He's about to get up and start fighting. And Victor stops him, saying, oh, there's rules around here. You'll get thrown in solitary for a month. And Cody's like, what are you doing? Leave me alone. Who are you? I don't trust you. Stay away from me. And And then the next thing you see is they have to stand in line to get their shots. And who is there helping to give the shots out but that fellow we saw in the photo, Bo. And just in case we didn't realize, they even said his name. He says, "Oh, Bo, what are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to get out." And Bo's like, "Oh, well, I got pneumonia and I have to stay." And then he tells Cody, "Well, I'm getting out tomorrow. Do you want me to do anything for you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want you to go look up Big Ed," right? And then Fallon's in the line. He's like, "La, la, 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 la." And then he sees Bo and he's like, "Oh, no." And he keeps hesitating and he's not going forward. And the guy behind him, the guy's name is Parker, kind of pushes him and he punches him. And then he gets into the guards try to break it up. He starts punching them. And all this causes Bo not to really be able to see him because he's making sure to be punching him with his head turned away from Bo. And it also gets him a month in solitary, so that gets him out of the problem of seeing Bo. Then it's cut. This is obviously a month later. We lose, I guess, a whole month. Assuming it was a month. I don't know. They didn't really say. I'm assuming it was since that's what he said. But then the mail's being delivered and the guys say, "Oh, Victor's on vacation still." They call it on vacation. But he's coming back today. And there's another cellmate besides Reader and Victor, this fellow called Tommy Riley. And I did want to mention really quickly about Tommy Riley because the fellow that played Tommy Riley was named Robert Osterloh. And the reason I want to mention him is because he was born in Pittsburgh, PA.
Hey.
And he played a lot of thugs and gangsters in films, including in the film Gun Crazy. Now, this is the part where I say about the photo of the wife being a problem, because Cody wants Reader to read Victor's lips to find out what he's up to. He doesn't trust him. And he says, well, he can do it maybe during visiting hours and see what he's saying to the person that visits him. And they said, well, let's open his mail and see what's in here. And they pull out a picture of this brunette lady and they say, "Oh, this must be his wife," and they prop up the picture on the table for him. "Oh, won't he be surprised when he returns?" And then right then he comes back and he comes walking into the cell like nothing unusual. And that's when Cody says something sarcastic about, "Don't you know there are rules in this joint?" And Victor says, "Oh, well, maybe I just didn't want to get my shots." And Cody's laughing, waiting for him to react to this picture, and he's not reacting. And Cody's getting suspicious. He's like, "Well, maybe something's wrong with his eyesight." And he's like, "What's the gag here?" Right. And then he looks on his bed and he sees there's an envelope addressed to him. And then he looks over at the picture and he realizes what has happened. And he makes this big production about how, "Oh, she changed her hair color. I didn't even recognize her," which I guess they kind of, do they believe him at the time? Cody has a little smirk on his face. I don't know if they believe that.
Yeah, it's not clear, but
it's not clear if Cody, but
enough tension to
Cody still doesn't. You definitely don't think Cody trusts him at this point, regardless. And then they hear something in the next cell, and again, Reader uses this mirror to read this guy's lips, and they have a shot of the guy in the mirror. It's so cool, really good camera work. Then he's saying, "Oh, apparently Cody's gang pulled off another heist." And they're asking Cody, "Oh, are you going to get your share?" And Cody says, "Oh, yeah, Ma'll see to that." But then he looks a little uncertain to me. And then that cuts to Ma telling everybody, she's in the room with everybody, telling them Cody gets his share. Anybody have an argument with that? And she's expecting Big Ed to have an argument. And he's like, no problem, which makes Verna get really mad. And she walks out and leaves. And then all the guys leave. And Verna's outside with Big Ed. She's telling him, make a move, take over, do something. You have these ideas, do something. You're scared of Cody still. And then Ed starts to insinuate that Cody could have an accident in prison. And he has a man on the inside that is buddy-buddy with Cody. And then he kisses Verna, and who's looking through the window?
There's Ma.
Ma. And then you see Cody working on the floor, and you see this guy, Parker. This guy is the same guy that was behind Fallon in the line. He's running this machine. Cody's loading the stuff up, and he goes off for some reason. He goes to dump the load, I think. And all of a sudden, Parker walks over and moves his little can. And Fallon notices this. He's paying attention. We should call him Victor now. Victor notices this, and he's like, I wonder why I did that. He's just puzzled at first. And then he comes back, and there's all these, this is a lot of great intercutting, I think. Right. There's a lot of, all these close-ups of what's happening. You see him pulling the lever, this big machine moving across overhead, Cody doing his thing, and then a shot to Fallon, what's going on, and then all of a sudden you realize that this lever is going to fall down on.
Yeah, the crane operator is...
Yeah, it's going to fall down on his head.
Yeah. So
and Fallon has to dive and rescue Cody. he's a little surprised, but he gets up and I'm fine. And they keep saying this thing about, do you want a medal? Should you get a medal?
Right.
And
I saved you.
Yeah.
What do you want, a medal?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's not grateful.
Right.
He's not grateful. As a matter of fact, he says people don't stick their necks out unless they want something. And again, he's still very mistrustful of Victor/Fallon. But then when Cody comes over to Parker, Parker's like, oh, he looks very scared. He said, oh, I'm sorry, it's an accident. And Cody's like, accidents happen. And at this point, you don't think he really thinks anything of it. You don't get the impression that he's suspicious at this point. I didn't.
Right.
And another reason I feel that is because the next thing that happens is he has a visit with Ma, and Ma starts saying, what happened to your head? Well, there was an accident. Was it an accident? And then he starts thinking that thing that Ma does, where she manipulates.
Right.
And she tells him, hey, Verna and Big Ed ran off together. And he's like, well, I'll take care of that when I get out of prison, whatever, And she realizes that he still doesn't seem to be getting it. And she has to be a lot more direct, where she's saying, I don't think they would have run off unless they thought that something was going to happen to you. And it's very coincidental that this happens at the same time as this accident of yours. And you can see now Cody is starting to think, whoa, I don't think this was an accident.
Right. They wouldn't have planned these things
Yes.
unless you were going to be out of the picture.
Yes. Yeah, and she's convincing him, like she always does. And she tells him, oh, I'm going to take care of Big Ed. And he's trying to tell her, don't, leave it alone. Don't do it. And she doesn't listen to him. She just walks out and she refuses to listen. So then, of course, the next thing you see, he's back on the floor, but you can see he's like really worried. I think he's thinking about his mother. But then he does see Parker and he gets that sort of smile, that evil smile on his face, like, oh, I'm not going to do anything to you now. I'm just going to make you sweat and wait. And he just looks really scary at this point. Like, he's terrifying. But then he's also, after he's done threatening Parker, he's going back about his job, and that he's thinking of his mother again. He's worrying about his mother, and then he starts to fall into one of these headache things. And luckily, he goes over, he crawls to Victor, whether intentionally or he's just the closest person, I don't know. And Victor kind of does what the mother does.
Right.
Rubs his head, tells him, I've always admired you since I was a kid. I've always wanted to join your gang. And again, the same thing as the mother. When he starts to get back together, he tries to stand up. He says, no, don't let them see you look vulnerable. It's the exact same thing. It's almost like he verbatim did what the mother did without knowing.
Right. And at this point, he's really replaced her role, right, for him in the prison setting.
Yeah, you see now Cody is starting to trust Victor. And then as soon as Victor realizes this, as Cody walks away, you see this little smile on Victor's face. I'm winning. And then the next thing, Cody's in the cell. Victor's like, is everything okay? Because I guess they're supposed to be asleep. It's night. It's dark. He says he's worried about Ma, and then they start talking. I like the scene because they're both very, very close together, very intimately. Everything's dark except the little light on their face. They're whispering. There's not a lot of music in the background. And they're talking about escaping, and Victor has this plan to turn off the generators. And he says, we don't need a gun. Don't cut anybody else on this. And they make an agreement on this and said, yeah, that sounds like good. And then the next thing that happens is this wife of Victor's comes to visit, and Reader is there watching him. But every time he wants to tell the wife something, he puts his hand in front of his mouth so Reader can't say. And he's basically saying, like, hey, tell them this, tell them that. And then the wife is like, you want to get a divorce? So it seems like they're talking about this, but he basically kind of conveys, get a car with an oscillator. This is what we need.
Here,
right.
Let everyone else know. Here's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is another thing about this new technology. Now they have this oscillator and this transmitter. Okay, that's pretty fancy technology. Right. They even talk about how the car can be
explained to the audience again, where
how the car can be tracked.
Right.
Exactly.
Up to 20 miles on this test. And
it's very interesting. I don't know if they could really do that at the time or how they came up with that. That's a whole nother story. But then unfortunately what happens is they show this prison cafeteria. And this is an interesting scene. Cody and everybody sits down. Cody's sitting across from Victor. Cody mouths tonight, and Victor nods. And then Cody sees somebody he recognizes several guys down. He tells Tommy, isn't that so-and-so? And Tommy says, yeah, I just came in today. And Cody says, ask him how my mom is. And then they do this little thing where they pass.
A little telephone.
Yeah,
right.
They pass down from person to person. And one of the people in the scene is Jim Thorpe. Mm-hmm. Jim Thorpe, he's the guy in the middle of the chain of men. And each guy is saying, ask how Cody's mother is. Ask how Cody's mother is. And then when we get to the guy, he says, she's dead. And then they pass it back. She's dead. She's dead. She's dead. She's dead. Until Tommy comes, and then he hesitates. And he's like, she's dead. And then Cody starts this whimpering. And he's like, It's very weird. And then he stands up and screams and bangs his cup on the table. And it said that you get all these shocked expressions from everybody. They said those were very real because none of the cast knew what he was going to do.
Planned, yeah. They're all extras.
Yeah, they didn't have any idea.
Limited time to shoot that scene. So just because they didn't have the budget for the extras is what I read, that they wanted all of those scenes done before noon, done at lunch. So there wasn't a lot of prep, not a lot of rehearsal, not a lot of takes.
Yeah, so they had no idea what Cagney was planning to do. So when he screamed, it scared everybody.
Yeah, he really, great job of portraying somebody slowly losing it and then exploding. And
he's great at playing insanity to begin with. But yeah, he crawls across the table. He's screaming, he's crying, he's punching every guard that comes near him. He punches all of them, and he's screaming, "I want to get out of here!" And they're carrying him out. He's struggling. It's very dramatic. I mean, it's a very dramatic scene, and it's what you might imagine somebody might do if they were losing their mind and they were grief-stricken. They have him in the prison medical facility in a straitjacket, and then why is Tommy coming in and feeding him soup? I did that. That's one part that I didn't.
Why he's the one?
Why would they allow that?
Right.
Here's your cellmate.
Right.
Your cellmate can come feed you the soup. We don't have any staff. But anyhow, for whatever reason, Tommy comes in to feed him the soup, and Cody's saying all these things that sounds like hallucinations, and Tommy's like, no, it's Tommy, it's me. And then all of a sudden he starts whispering, "Bring your gun."
Right.
And Tommy catches on to what he's doing, and he tells him he wants to break out to bring his gun, and Tommy says, "Well, you got to cut me in." And Cody's like, "Yeah, it's a deal." And the doctor's telling Cody he's going to be transferred to an institution. They're telling him Cody has to be transferred because he's insane. And meanwhile, Evans was getting ready to go bring the oscillating car thingamajig, and he gets a call from the warden saying, "Oh, this is what's happened. Cody went berserk. He's in the mental." He's going and he's like,
jig is up.
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, okay, that's it. We're done." And then he says, "Make sure you get a pardon for this guy, Victor." Right. So he thinks it's over. He doesn't go get the oscillating car. But the psychiatrists come in and they ask Cody, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" He says, "Yeah, I think I would like to." And then Tommy comes in again with the food, and they're like, no, he's not having food now. And he's like, no, I want to eat the food now. And he comes over and starts feeding him. He's like, "What am I, a 2-year-old? I can eat for myself." And they say, "Oh, sure, no problem. Let's let him out of the straitjacket." Why shouldn't we? It's all good.
Sure.
Yeah, let's just let him out.
Tommy's the one to do it.
And let's let Tommy let him out, not the doctors. No, but Tommy's like, "Oh, I'll take care of it." And as he's laying him out, you can see him slide the gun into his hand. And as soon as he gets out of the straitjacket, he starts shoot. First of all, I will say, when he comes out of the straitjacket, he shoots a shot. Not at anybody, but he shoots a shot, and it scares everybody. And everybody puts their hands up. But that's important to remember, that he shot a shot there. So he holds everybody up. He leaves the shrinks with Tommy. He tells the doctor to make a phone call because he wants to get Victor, Reader, and Parker. He tells them, "Go get them out." And they come out. Nobody asks, "Why are we being taken to the medical?"
Right. They're called to the infirmary.
In the middle of the night. Nobody asks any questions. I mean, assume it's the middle of the night. I don't really know what time it is. But then the guys come in. Cody tells them what's going on. Victor's like, "We can't make it this way. Let's not use guns." Of course, he doesn't want to do that. And Parker's like, "Well, why am I going? Why do I have to go?" He's like, "Well, you're my pal. I want you to come." And Parker's like, "I didn't want to hurt you. I had to do what Big Ed told me." He's like trying to protest. And they're putting Reader in the straitjacket, and they're going to have him pretend to be Cody, and they're going to hide in. Everybody else is going to hide in the car, and the psychiatrist is going to drive them out of the prison. That's the plan. And Cody tells Parker, "You get in the trunk." I don't know why Parker just didn't say at this point, "Shoot me," because I don't think I'm getting out of this anyway.
Yeah, he doesn't seem very bright, so maybe that's part of it.
This is my point about the shot, because he says, as they're going out, when the guards, to see if they don't know if the guards are going to let them out or not, he says, "I have 6 slugs in this gun in case we don't make it out." But isn't that a 6-shooter? It looked like it was.
Yeah,
it looked like a regular revolver.
Maybe, yeah.
If he shot one shot, how does he have 6 left?
Yeah.
That was my question.
Should have been bluffing.
And then the guard does let them out. So they do get out. And then Evans gets the word that Cody's busted out. They hear it on the radio as they're in the car. And he does also find out that Fallon escaped with Cody. So he's kind of glad with that, because they think, "Oh, we can still get him." And Victor spends all this time trying to figure out how to contact them. He tries to go to the phone. Cody pulls the phone out of the wall when they're taking the shrinks. They're tying him up and leaving them somewhere. And then they're going to go get in the car. Parker's still in the trunk. He says, "Oh, I need some air." And Cody's eating a sandwich. He's like, "You okay, Parker?" Eating the sandwich. "I stuffy. I could use some air." He's like, "You need some air?" boom, 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 shoots up the trunk while still eating the sandwich, and then he gets in the car and just keeps eating the sandwich. Very
it's
casual.
a pretty ruthless scene.
Okay, do you see again another storm is approaching? I feel like when something very dramatic is going to happen, a big scene like this, they use this storm thing, and the storm's happening. They show the house. Here you hear the radio talking about the breakout, and then you see there's a pan around the room. You see Verna sitting there, and she looks really scared. And then you see Big Ed is nailing this bell to the door, and she wants to leave. She's like, "Let's get out of here. Everybody else has left." And he says, "I've got to face him. I can't just run away." And she says, "Well, then I can leave." And he says, "Well, then I'll tell Cody that you caused his mother to get shot in the back." And then she gets really scared. She goes into bed, and then there's this suspenseful music, and she's trying to sneak out of the house via the window because she knows not to open the door. Mm-hmm. And there's a nice lighting on her as she goes through the dark house. It's real, and the camera moving with her. It's really interesting. And she gets to the garage. She's about to get in the car. Now there's a very dramatic music, and all of a sudden she's grabbed by Cody. He's got his hand over her mouth, and Virginia Mayo said that James Cagney was not where she expected him to be in this scene and that he had missed his cue. So when he grabbed her, she was truly startled. She didn't expect it. And so that the reaction she had was very realistic. And she also said that she was terrified and she actually thought he was going to kill her, just the way he was looking and acting.
Wow.
And that's how convincing he was as a homicidal maniac. She was actually terrified. But then she starts her little act. "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. No, I love you, Cody. I only was with Big Ed because he told me I had to go with him," and all this nonsense.
He was trying to escape.
She's. And she tells him, "Oh, Big Ed shot your mom. I tried to help your mother, but Big Ed shot her in the back." And of course, that immediately takes Cody's focus to Big. Is he in the house? Where is he? And she's like, "Oh, I'll get you in. I'll help you. I'll help you out.
Follow me."
Yeah. So she takes him into the house, and Big Ed's making this dummy in the bed, so it looks like he's in bed, but he's sitting in the chair. You have a very light tiptoeing like music here, which I thought was very well done. That's the sort of thing I do like. They do more of that stuff, less of the big music. Cody rings the bell. She goes up into the room, and I thought he's waiting for somebody to come in. She's going to come in. He's going to shoot her. That was what I thought was going to happen.
Right.
I was quite surprised when it didn't. Yeah, I was quite surprised when it didn't happen that way. But the thing that I guess it's not funny, but it's kind of unfortunate for Verna is that she's trying to convince him, "Oh, I just came back because I cared about you." He's like, "Oh, how sweet." He's like hugging her, and she knows that Cody's there, and she doesn't want to be attached to him because she's afraid he's going to shoot Big Ed, and she's going to get the bullet.
Right.
So every time she tries to, she's like, "I got to go get a drink," and then he comes up and behind her and hugs her, and she's like, "God, get away from me," And then she manages to get away, and he turns, and that shot of James Cagney in the door, oh my God, that look on his face, he looks so terrifying. And it's all dark with just the light on his face, and he just looks, it is really terrifying. And he winds up shooting Ed in the back, get back at him. And then he goes to the top of the stairs. Ed's fallen down partially down the stairs, and he gives his arm to Verna. They go down the stairs together, and then Cody kicks, all the guys come in, and Cody kicks Ed's body to the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah. Catch.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
And then, again, you have your close-up into the big shot. They do a lot of the gang talking about a new heist that they had thought of under Big Ed, and they had this gas truck for the job. And Vic starts asking about the fence at this point. He wants to know, who is this fence, the traitor? And Verna's complaining that the radio doesn't work. And Victor's asking, is the traitor trustworthy? Tell me a little bit more about this guy. And Cody's just divulging all this information. He totally trusts Victor at this time. And they go and look at the gas truck, and Cody has this idea to put a hole. He said, "Can you cut a hole into the bottom of this tank?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then he tells this story about the Trojan horse, which I thought was really kind of a cool thing in the middle of a gangster film.
Yeah.
And then a man drives up. He has fishing gear. He asks to use the telephone. The guys say, "Hey, we don't got no phone here." And he comes out. He's like, "Oh, no. There's a phone here. There's one in the house. Come on in with me." And the guys are like, "Oh, yeah, that guy's dead. He's not going to make it out." But then you see Cody and the guy go into the thing. They shake hands right away, and they start making this plan about this new heist. And this guy is suggesting a chemical plant, and the guys are all outside like, "Oh, we didn't hear any gunshots. What's going on here?" And Victor's like, "What's going on?" He gets real suspicious. He wants to go see. He goes inside. He starts quizzing this guy about fishing, and he gives him the wrong answer. And Victor pulls out a gun. He tells Cody, "This guy's a phony." And Cody starts laughing. He seems very proud of Victor in this scene. He introduces this guy as Traitor. This is Traitor. This is the fence. And then Victor's like, "Oh, yes, and your name is?" And the guy's like, not going to give him the name. Cody's like, "Oh, yeah, you can tell him. We're 50-50 partners." And so he does. And I should mention the guy that plays the traitor is actually a really well-known character actor named Fred Clark. Daniel Winston is the name of the character. He was a pilot in World War II in the Navy and then transferred into Patton's Third Army, serving in Europe. He's a common character actor in many films in 1950s, including Sunset Boulevard, How to Marry a Millionaire, A Place in the Sun, and Auntie Mame. But after that, Victor tries to get off the property at night, and he gets stopped by one of the lookout guys, and he starts fighting him. And then Cody comes up very dramatically with this big drum roll, looking down this sort of angle where he looks huge. And he's, why are you leaving? And he's getting suspicious again. Right. And Victor starts giving this ridiculous story about how he wants to be with his wife, claims he's lonely, which that was the right thing to say because that sort of struck a note in Cody. He believes him. He says, I'm lonely too. I'm missing my mother. He was out there talking to her. And then he talks about how she always said top of the world. Right. And I really think there was a great acting job by Cagney in this scene. He's very good here.
Yeah, there's just, even though you don't see it, just the idea that he's out walking this field at night, conversing with his mom, and maybe I'm crazy, or maybe there's some vulnerability in that scene that he kind of tapped into. And I don't know, there's some sexual undertones in there as well, where he's like, hey, and she doesn't know. I got to go see my wife. It's been a while. She doesn't know that I'm, I couldn't, that's why I didn't ask, and da-da-da. Oh, okay, yeah.
Like man to man. Oh, yeah, I got you, buddy.
I can relate to that. I'm out here talking to my mom in this field at night, who's dead and gone.
But he looks equally maybe unhinged and vulnerable simultaneously, and that's what I think is the greatness of James Cagney, to pull something like that off. It's not very many people could do that. And then after that, they're inside. They're talking about this trip. Of course, Verna is saying, oh, we'll be so rich. We'll go to Paris and all this stuff. And then Cody says, he toasts Victor. He says, top of the world to Victor. So now you do feel like Victor has taken over his mother's place. And then Victor says to Verna, oh, is your radio still broken? She says, yes. He said, oh, I can fix your radio. Why don't I go fix your radio for you? And then you see him working on the radio, and then you see him attaching the radio to the underneath of the truck. He's rigged up a transmitter of some sort. Right. This guy is like MacGyver. Yeah. I mean, seriously. But then Cody's, what are you doing? Get out. We've got to go. And then he splits them all up again, and Verna is supposed to drive the other guys to the rendezvous point, and Vic, Tommy, and Cody go in the truck, but the truck starts smoking, so they pull into a gas station to get water for the radiator. Now, this happens a lot in old movies. Did you ever notice this radiator issue? I guess this was a problem with trucks back in the day, or cars back in the day. I don't really have this anymore. But Victor goes into the bathroom and he writes a message on the mirror for the police to contact Evans. And Tommy almost sees the message because he comes in to get Victor, but he quickly throws his jacket over like he's hanging it there. And then as Victor's leaving, he tells the attendant, hey, that mirror is filthy in there. What are you talking about? That's such a clean bathroom. And then they meet up with the rest and Trader. And the guys start getting into the tank of the truck. And Cody asks, where's the driver? And then they shoot to him coming out of the shop. And this is very dramatic shot framed in the doorway because it's Bo.
Right.
And it's like Bo that can recognize Victor/Fallon, and he's the truck driver. Yeah. But it's very dramatic because they just keep missing seeing each other. Just as he comes up, Victor has turned his back to go into the tank, so they don't see each other. And then, of course, he's in the tank. And the cops read the message on the mirror, and they call Evans, and he tells them to get every tracking car possible and clear the airways. And they plan to track the truck. And then you see all these neat cars with these little rings on the top that are some sort of tracking device where they can find this transmitter. Right. And it's going to be very similar to they're all going down these roads. Exactly. It's the same sort of thing. And they say the streets mentioned in the scene are actual real streets in California. If you go there, they have these same streets. But I'm going to stop there because I don't like spoilers. We don't want to do spoilers. And I think at this point, you don't know what could happen. Anything could happen. But I will say the end is very, very dramatic. And I just wish, the only thing I will say about the end is I just wish they had left off the last line of the film. Yeah. Just ended it before that last line. I don't want to say who said it or what was happening, but if they had just left off that last line, I feel like it would have had it would have been the most incredible, impactful ending. Yeah.
Unnecessary attempt at closure.
Yeah, really unnecessary. It would have been so more so much more impactful.
Yeah. Well, as I said, when we were getting started and talking about why picking the film and scheduling and so forth, there was another piece of me that this is my obvious Mother's Day nod in picking this film.
True.
As well as we were trying to figure out dates. For me, I think going back and looking at Cagney's work and thinking about contemporary or more recent actors that maybe work in the same type of film and type of character. I mean, there's some obvious points of reference with Joe Pesci through Scorsese films.
Yeah.
That you see them in the film, it's iconic.
Yeah.
And then just how ruthless, particularly the Tommy character in Goodfellas, is just the worst. I mean, probably the worst movie villain.
Yeah, but you never root for him. That's where I feel like the difference of somebody at Cagney's caliber comes in.
Yeah. I would agree with not rooting for him in particular, but you're rooting for the mobsters a little bit. I mean, I think people identify the anti-hero, right? Sticking it to the man, finding their way.
I definitely did not like Tommy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So to me, that's the greatness of James Cagney as an actor, to be able to still make people want to root for him, even when he's playing the most ruthless, horrible character.
Yeah. As you referenced, there's some other touch points based on real characters and real experiences. So. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think another thing that's worth mentioning is I would not describe this film as a film noir.
Yeah,
it's definitely a gangster. It's a gangster film.
Yeah, I was surprised it was ranked a film noir.
It's not. I mean, it's really. I don't think that it is. It's part of the era, but it's definitely not for me for a number of reasons. It's a gangster film. It's gritty. I mean, you touched on some of the ways that cinematography is used to advance the story and enhance the story. It's doing things differently than film noir, right? And it's right. Warner Brothers. It's gritty. There are those elements to it, but it's the moral ambiguity of film noir that's missing here.
Yeah, and you don't have your you don't have your sort of anti-hero person that is not a villain, but he's sort of like this guy that gets led down the wrong path by the femme fatale. Yeah,
there's no turn, there's no temptation, there's no Willy or Walty. Yeah, it's pretty clear: good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
Cat and mouse.
And there's a lot of, I feel a lot of times film noirs also have a certain element of mystery in them. And to me, there's like no mystery whatsoever in this. You're never confused about the crime. You know what's happened.
Right. There's no whodunit. And yeah, definitely this, as we mentioned at the beginning of the film and the beginning of our discussion, that quick action, heist, movement, there's no opportunity to kind of think about good versus evil. Yeah. Right? The thing worth mentioning that we've hit on throughout, of course, is this psychotic character and the twisted psyche of the villain, and bringing that to the fore. In the end of the film, I think that you can pull references to other more contemporary films that it's pretty clear that this is done in homage to this character in different ways.
The ending before the one line is one of the most powerful, to me, endings. We won't tell you what it is, but it's very powerful.
Yeah.
So on Silver Screen Time Machine, we do a ranking system, 1 through 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. What would you rank White Heat?
Oh, I think it's a 4.5.
Oh,
can I do a 0.5?
You can.
For me, I think for the era, for what it's up to, obviously the acting and then all of the craft behind the different elements, ranging from writing to cinematography to score and so forth. Yeah, for me, as far as a heist film of that time, and it's in a lot of ways a police procedural, right?
Yeah.
We're sort of given a little too much information about how they're going to get the bad guys, but again, it gives the audience more information than the characters, which becomes a trope in heist films to follow. So I think there's a template that's laid there.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'm giving it a 4 because the strength of James Cagney, he is what carries this film. The cinematography and the editing is beautifully done. The music is very good. The dramatic music aside, the music is done very well. It is a little low budget type production, which is very common with these kind of gangster films, so it's not surprising. It's far better than Public Enemy. Granted, it was filmed 10 years later or whatever. But it's very good. Like I said, I hadn't seen it. I thought it was very good. I think the other actors maybe not as great as they could be. It feels like a lot of stock actors from the Warner Brothers studio. And I do think Cagney complained about that. He wanted Frank McHugh to play Tommy, and he was a little disappointed by the actors they used. But James Cagney himself just carries the film. He's phenomenal in the role, and the story is very interesting. An interesting story. It keeps your attention. And like I said, with the cinematography and the editing, keeps it suspenseful. And the very interesting parts about all the different technologies that they put in. It's very, very fascinating. It's not what you expect in a gangster film. So very well done. I really liked it. Thank you for suggesting it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to talk about it.
So I want to thank you again for appearing on the show today, Ross, and hopefully we'll see you again. And again, everybody should check out the Lindsay Theater. It's a great theater. They have a lot of great programming, so go check that out. And for Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy's Classic Film Review, this is Wendy saying goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And please leave us a comment or a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Intro and outro music composed by Heidi Engel. Artwork by Tyler Birch. Produced and edited by Wendy Whittick. Recorded at PCTV Studios, Pittsburgh, PA. See you next time.